now
on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 6:06. Thanks for joining us on this Monday morning. It's O'Connor and Company getting you going and informed while you get there. Coming up at 7:05, Joe DeGenova is going to join us, give us his rundown on the Trump indictment, certainly, but also on the latest in the Biden case. In fact, we're going to share with you some of Devon Archer's interview with Tucker Carlson. Part 2 hit on Friday or over the weekend, and it's all very important stuff, damning stuff, kind of evidence that proves that Joe Biden is corrupt. We'll get to that coming up in a little bit. At 7:35, Stephen Carbelk is joining us. He's running for the chair of Loudoun County Board of Supervisors. 8:35, Hung Cao running for the Republican nomination to square off against Tim Kaine for the U.S. Senate next year. I'm Larry O'Connor with Mercedes Schlapp back from vacation. Mercy, good to have you here.
I know. I'm ready to take a nap.
You are,
no,
you are
I'm kidding.
tanned,
I'm kidding.
rested,
I'm kidding. I am tan and rested, yes.
and ready. I got to ask you, when you go to the
Yes.
Caribbean with Matt Schlapp, I mean, how much sunscreen does it take to keep that guy from turning into a lobster?
Well, the problem is his hair is only getting whiter and whiter, and and the thing is, like, he's letting it's growing out, so it's just, you got to see him, Larry. It's too much. It's too much.
Yeah. Well, listen,
he has great hair, though, I have to say.
He's got five daughters, and
daughters.
He's married to you. It's a wonder. No, of course, he's got white
Well,
hair.
and it was the first time in like 21 years that we took a vacation, just us two together, because the kids were all traveling. So it was really special.
There
and we
go.
went back to the
Guess
baths.
we should be expecting daughter number 6 coming up.
Don't make me blush. But we went to the baths, which is down in the British Virgin Islands, which we went there 21 years ago for our honeymoon. So it was just so wonderful to.
Great.
And the funny thing is, we couldn't remember. We're like, we actually were here. We were just like, it's been so long.
Yes, I couldn't possibly remember my honeymoon.
21 years, for crying out
Well,
loud.
that's great. Well, and
was
of course,
wonderful.
while you were gone, as you know, Donald Trump indicted again, this time by Jack Smith, on the events after following the 2020 election leading up to January 6th. As we mentioned earlier in the program, Trump plans to ask for a recusal of this judge because this judge is already on the record as to having very strong opinions and already judging against President Trump when he claimed executive privilege during the January 6th committee. Also, his lawyer says it's very interesting that people have to understand this. They say that his efforts leading up to January 6th in calling into question and challenging the validity of several states' electoral college results were not criminal acts. They were aspirational acts. In other words, he wanted this to happen, but not for criminal reasons, but because he truly believed, based on the advice of his lawyers and based on the evidence that was presented to him, he truly believed that this is the right thing to do.
Right. And I want to add to that. Anyone who's dealt with Donald Trump knows that Donald Trump likes to get to the bottom of whatever the issue may be. So if it was on the issue of the election, he will ask 100 questions. Yeah. He will talk to different people to get opinions onto what can be done, what cannot be done. You know, he's very methodical in that way. And, you know, he wanted answers on the election and why, you know, one day, you know, the night of the election, you had Wisconsin up by 100,000 votes. The next day you wake up and the 100,000 votes are, it's gone basically, you know, and so those are the questions that I think, is that enough for that to be criminal? Right. Absolutely not. You know what I mean?
The only answer that's been provided to that question is, well, Democrats voted by mail and the mail-in ballots had to be counted, and that's why that lead disappeared. The problem with that is the process of counting those mail-in ballots were done in such a way that obvious questions were asked, you know, covering up the windows so nobody could see, keeping Republican observers out, shutting down operations so all the observers go home, and then just deciding an hour later, oh, you know what, let's go ahead and resume operations so all the observers weren't there. This all should have been done with complete and total transparency. Remember the hanging chads of 2000, where everybody watched every single ballot individually judged? Why didn't we do that this time? Of course it was worth asking. John Lauro is the attorney for President Trump. He was on Meet the Press with Chuck Todd. Actually, he did all the shows this weekend.
He did.
And here's what he had to say.
If he had proof he won the state, why did he threaten the Secretary of State with a criminal with a criminal charge?
He's talking about the Secretary of State of Georgia, by the way, here.
Right.
That wasn't a threat at all. What he was asking for is for Raffensperger to get to the truth. He believed that there were in excess of 10,000 votes that were counted illegally. And what he was asking for is the Secretary of State to act appropriately and find these votes that were counted illegally. That was an hold on one second. That was an aspirational ask. He's entitled to petition.
You heard Chuck Todd jump in there and say, find. He said, find the votes, which, I mean, let's just be clear here. If you believe the votes are there and the votes haven't been counted, then that is the correct, and they keep pointing to that as if it's nefarious or criminal. Obviously, that is the appropriate word. He didn't say create the vote. He didn't say make up the votes. He didn't say pretend the vote. No, he said the votes are there, find them.
Think about how Chuck Todd, by the way, why is Chuck Todd still doing Meet the Press? I thought he was out.
He's having a long going away party.
Oh, is it a long going away party?
I
thought he was
fall
gone
that they
already.
actually bring in his replacement.
Oh gosh, how embarrassing! So he mentions. Think about his question. How President Trump threatening? He uses the word threat. So just the question alone is saying, well, he was making the assumption that Trump was threatening the Secretary of Georgia. Again, anyone who's dealt with Donald Trump, when he talks to you, he's just very direct in asking his questions. I mean, it's like they call it a threat. Well, no, actually, he wants to get to the bottom of what is going on in that state, and he has every right to ask these questions. And so this has turned into, part of the indictment efforts.
Here's the audio of the phone call that he's referring to where Chuck Todd says there was a threat made.
The ballots are corrupt, and you're going to find that they are, which is totally illegal. It's more illegal for you than it is for them, because you know what they did and you're not reporting it. That's a criminal offense. All I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
So what he's saying is by informing the Secretary of State that if he certifies a fraudulent election, that's a felony offense, which it is, he's saying, well, that's a threat. That's a
right.
threat.
Is that a threat? The way he even talked to the Secretary of State. No,
of course it's not. All right. Meanwhile, Bill Barr, the former attorney. By the way, there's another thing that all these commentators are saying. Well, Trump knew that the election was lost because Bill Barr told him it was, and other advisors told him it was. Okay, well, forgive me, but Bill Barr is not Donald Trump's personal attorney, and he was not hired to represent the campaign or the candidate. He was the U.S. Attorney General. He could have his opinion, but he also got other legal advice from other lawyers that told him otherwise.
From a prosecutor's point of view, is this a case you would have brought?
Well, from a prosecutor's standpoint, I think it's a legitimate case. But
from an attorney general's point of view.
But I think there are other considerations, and I would have taken those into account.
Yeah, so he wouldn't go so far as to say he would have brought it, but he did say this was a legitimate case. I disagree, and a whole lot of other legal experts do, including Joe DeGeneva, who joins us at 7 o'clock. There's more developments over the weekend, more things that people said, and more things you need to know about the indictment against President Trump and how this is playing out. We'll get to all that in a moment, but first it's 6:15, WMAL traffic and weather every 10 minutes. First on the fives.
The Decline and Decay of the U.S. Constitutional Order by Virginia author Jeffrey Sachs highlights the fundamental principles of our American ideals and serves as a warning sign for all. The Decline and Decay of the U.S. Constitutional Order, available now at politicsandprose.com and Barnes & Noble everywhere.
So Bill Barr went on to say, this is not a First Amendment case. He said if this was all about Trump questioning the election, then I would be concerned on a First Amendment front. But he went on to say his actions went beyond political speech. It's almost like saying, you can think that the election was done in a fraudulent way and that the American people's votes were being canceled out by corrupt actors, but you better not say anything that would have consequence. You can't actually do anything, especially when you're president of the United States and you actually have the ability to do something about it or use whatever constitutional means are at your disposal. It's so outrageous and so stupid. And again, I just want to keep going back to this. If you're going to indict a former president on charges like this, a former president who was also the leading candidate for president running against the current president, you shouldn't have a case where the people like Jonathan Turley and Alan Dershowitz and Andrew McCarthy and Joe DeVan, other people can step up and say, "Whoa, there's something smells about this. This is not a slam dunk at all. This is a real." I mean, he's interpreting the law in such a way that is not really how it's ever been interpreted before. It's got to be a slam dunk, Mercedes. It's not enough that Bill Barr says, "Well, yeah, it's a legitimate case," when you've got all these other legal and constitutional scholars say it isn't.
Bill Barr has a huge bias against President Trump. Obviously, that did not end well in terms of that relationship. But when you have other, as you were mentioning, legal experts, I mean, we saw Alan Dershowitz, a former Trump lawyer, say, "I like Bill Barr. He's a good man, but I think he's just dead wrong about that. Of course, this is a free speech case. Everything involves his exercise of free speech, not just his First Amendment free speech, but also his First Amendment right to petition the government for a redress of grievances." And this goes back to the fact that President Trump was talking to different advisors, asking opinions as to give me an update on what's happening in Georgia, what is happening in Nevada, what is happening in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania. He has every right to do that. But it became then this, well, then he's linked to the J6 riots. And, you know, he was the one that instigated this. And, you know, look.
But there's no evidence of that.
There's no evidence of that.
And by the way, he hasn't been indicted for that. He wasn't indicted for incitement. He wasn't indicted for insurrection.
But it was almost implied like he was indicted for
because they just want to get this in front of a DC
Exactly.
jury.
And what did they do? Jack Smith gathered the information from the J6 committee to help build his case.
By the way, here's an interesting soundbite. This is, again, John Lauro, Trump attorney. This one's on George Stephanopoulos talking about Mike Pence. A very interesting statement. Listen.
Mike Pence will be one of our best witnesses at trial. I read his book very carefully. And if he testifies consistent with his book, then President Trump will be acquitted for these reasons. Number one, Mr. Pence recognizes that John Eastman, who was giving legal advice, was a renowned legal scholar. Number two, Vice President Pence recognized that there were discrepancies and fraud in connection with the election. He wanted it to be debated on Capitol Hill. Mr. Trump wanted it to be debated in the state legislatures. But make no mistake about it, based on what Vice President Pence will say, the government will never be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that President Trump had corrupt or criminal intent. And that's what this case is about.
Mike Pence. By the way, he's right about that. Mike Pence's only disagreement with President Trump is whether he had the constitutional power as vice president presiding
to send
over this to send it back. That's it. But Pence is on record saying, "Oh yeah, this election was completely screwed up."
Now, I did not read Mike Pence's book. I don't think that'd be my preference in reading that book necessarily. And I like Mike. I'll be honest. Like, I worked with Mike Pence. I like him. I like he has a wonderful family. But I think he's dead wrong on this issue of trying to make it seem that it was President Trump trying to put himself in front of the Constitution, or there was that disagreement between Pence and the president very
about
clearly.
What his powers are. Again, it's something that is untested and untried, which is the whole point here. He was getting legal advice, as was mentioned, by John Eastman, who is an impeccable scholar, constitutional scholar, who said, "Oh yeah, I mean, it's never been done before, but you could.
It's never been done, but you could ask." And then, but guess what? The state electors, a lot of them were like, "We're not going down this pathway. We're not going to recertify. We're sticking to what we have."
Can I ask you though? You said something earlier about with Bill Barr, he's got a bone to pick. It didn't end well with Trump. You can say that about almost everyone who was in the Trump administration. It didn't end well. It didn't end well. In fact, I've been trying to think. Ambassador Rick Grinnell, I believe, was the only person who was still working in the Trump administration who is actively campaigning for him this time.
Matt Whitaker is another one.
He was not working in the administration at the end of that. I'm talking about at the end.
Not at the end.
I'm talking about at the end. Does it bother you that people who were in that administration, you look at every cabinet member and every other official who was there, his chief of staff, everyone else, they're not with him now. Does it bother you that so often you can say, well, that didn't end well, that didn't end well? It never ends well.
Well, look, I know the president. He has been with me he was a great boss. I loved working for President Trump. I think that
it ended well with you, but you also left a year before the end.
Yeah, no, look, the one at the end, it got ugly. It did. I mean, it was a very stressful time. I tell you, because I was part of the campaign. It was a very stressful time and put a lot of pressure on these cabinet members who then have to try to get a job after working for Donald Trump. Let's remember, the Trump officials were put on a list by the leftist group saying, do not hire, corporate America, attention, do not hire the Trump officials. So to get a job after Trump was almost impossible for many of these people who stayed, especially till the end, because you were blacklisted. So I think that there was definitely a sense of how these cabinet members could have this degree of separation from Trump so that they're able to, you know,
so you
basically
think the reason it didn't
lives.
end well with Bill Barr is because Bill Barr was worried about his next job?
He's worried about not getting invited to the cocktail parties in D.C. for crying out loud. And, look, I don't know.
Then that also speaks to Trump hiring people who are worried about getting their cocktail party.
Well, but here, what I find with Donald Trump, and he would actually even admit to it, that he always now he says, he's like, if I would have known what I knew back then, which is, there were so many people that weren't loyal to the president, and I'm not saying, look, you have to be, you obviously have to be loyal to the country first and foremost, but the reality is look, he's going to push you. If you're in that job of attorney general, if you're in that job as the White House counsel, he's going to push you. It's just what he does. He's going to ask the tough questions. It's just how he is. He's the businessman versus the lawyer. Yeah. And the lawyers are always going to be the ones to say, these are your parameters. This is what you've got to work with. And it's a challenge. Look, it's a challenge for the president, but there's a lot of people that still are very loyal to him.
There are, absolutely.
And getting him elected.
It just, you're right. It's 624.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station.
Making sense of the news.
News Talk 105.9.
Now.
On News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
6:36, and we're leading up to the 7 o'clock hour where we'll talk to Joe Biden about all that stuff Mercedes and I just talked about with regard to the legal case against Donald Trump, plus the legal case mounting now, the case for impeachment against President Biden, which we're going to get into in mere moments. Then at 7:35, Stephen Karbelk, he's running for the chair of Loudoun County Board of Supervisors. 8:35, Hung Kao is running for the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate in Virginia. I'm Larry O'Connor with Mercedes Schlepp, back from vacation, looking tanned, rested, and ready.
I do. I feel tan, rested, ready, but now like my blood pressure's going back up because of it's too much news. It's so stressful. Yeah, I think you're trying to pick a fight with me. Seriously.
No, I'm just trying to have a lively exchange of ideas.
Exchange.
It's what our great listeners expect on a morning by morning basis, and you know why your blood pressure is going up, because it's back to school time. You've got to get your kids back.
Gosh.
When does that start? Like 3 weeks, right? 2 weeks?
It does, and they're so organized that they are already telling me, they're like, Mom, we got to go shopping for school supplies, and that's always like a stressful moment. Yep.
All right. Well, it's also stressful right now for the Biden administration, as despite their playing on the beach and laying down and riding a bike and everything, they recognize that the testimony last week of Devon Archer to the House Oversight Committee was, in fact, devastating. The media is ignoring it, and they're certainly ignoring Tucker Carlson's exclusive one-on-one with Devon Archer, where a lot was revealed. And you won't see the rest of the media covering this. They can. Don't give me that, it's proprietary, it's just Tucker Carlson's exclusive. No, this happens all the time. If you make news in an interview, they play it over and over again. They're either not playing it because they hate Tucker, or they're not playing it because they're protecting Joe Biden, or they're not playing, all of the above.
All of the above. A, B, C, D.
Here is a key moment of the exchange. Listen. Oh, look at that. Just perfect timing there. Hang on. Here is a key moment of the exchange. Listen.
The reaction to what you've said in public, to what you said to the committee on the Hill, and doubtless to what you've been telling us in this interview, is that, there's no corruption here at all. This is totally normal. Joe Biden had no role whatsoever in his son's business or knowledge of it. But
right.
That seems false.
Yeah, I think that's categorically false. I think that he was aware of Hunter's business. He met with Hunter's business partners. You found a letter that illustrates that he knew me.
And he's thanking you. He's thanking you for his efforts.
So I think that was, I think
for your efforts. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's not factually right.
Yeah, the notion that there's no evidence that there was any corruption and Joe Biden didn't know anything about it is, as Devon Archer puts it, just not factually right. And Devon Archer is the man who was in the room when all of this came down. Let's just be clear. For you to think that Joe Biden didn't understand what business his son was in and the value he brought to that business by being on the end of a speakerphone or at a dinner with his business clients, then you have to believe that after 50 years being in the highest levels in Washington, D.C., Joe Biden is either a complete and total moron or knows very well exactly. It's one of the two. He's either an absolute corrupt thug or he's a moron. There's no in between here.
I think it can be both, actually,
at this
both.
Point. He could be a moronic, corrupt thug.
It's interesting because it was House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan. He said that there was this 2011 note from then Vice President Joe Biden to his, to Devon Archer, solid proof that the current president has not been above board in his denials on the matter. So there was a letter that was exchanged, basically saying, in
other words, he's lying. Biden's been lying.
It was a handwritten footnote. Hope you guys are together. Really trying to just say he's very much aware of this Hunter Archer venture. And, you can't, as a son, be calling your father, who's the vice president, with your business associates. It's just simply wrong, and it raises so many questions as to the president's involvement in the business.
100% right, Mercy. But here's the other thing that really ventures into impeachment territory and why Joe Biden needs to be impeached. Because it's one thing for a politician to be corrupt, make money, and lie about it and cover it up. Please. I mean, even presidents have done that over the years. But here's the difference. When Joe Biden was on that debate stage with Donald Trump and he was lying to try to win the White House, he did more than just lie and cover it up. Listen to what he does here. He blames Russia. He blames a nuclear-powered adversary, a nuclear-equipped adversary of the United States of America, and drags them into it to use them as the fall guy, which is incredibly dangerous and hostile. You wonder why Putin is hostile toward the Biden administration? And is exercising hostility on the world stage because of what Joe Biden did to provoke them. Listen to this on the debate stage. Oh, good Lord, what is wrong? Oh, here we go. Listen to this.
So don't give me the stuff about how you're this innocent. Stuff is true about Russia, Ukraine, China, other countries, Iraq. If this is true, then he's a corrupt politician. So don't give me the stuff about how you're this innocent baby. Joe, they're calling you a corrupt politician.
Nobody. President Trump, I want to stay on the issue of race. We're talking about the issue.
Laptop from hell.
President Trump, we're talking about race right now, and I do want to stay on the issue of race. President Trump,
I have to respond to that.
Please,
because look,
very quickly.
There are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plant. They have said that this has all the 5 former heads of the CIA, both parties, say what he's saying is a bunch of garbage. Nobody believes it except his and his good friend Rudy Giuliani.
Not only does he use this bogus 51 former intelligence officers lie to, by the way, not only try to cover his butt when on the face of it, obviously it's not a lie, but also undermine America's faith in those. You wonder why people don't trust the FBI and the CIA and our intelligence. It's because of him, because of what he just did there. But also, I want to reiterate, he just accused Russia, a country who is already our adversary, who is equipped with nuclear weapons. He falsely accused them of tampering with our election. You wonder why Putin has been hostile? That's Exhibit A. This is the most reckless, irresponsible, impeachable thing that I've seen in my lifetime.
Okay, Congressman Larry O'Connor. This is good.
I'm ready.
I
Let's
like
go.
when you get all riled up like this. This is so exciting. No, but you're right. And look, I think you got to remember that it was during this period of time that when the Hunter laptop came out, that it was big tech colluding with the government. It was these national security officials writing this letter. Talk about trying to push propaganda and calling it Russian misinformation, instead of being transparent about the issue, they ignored the other. Remember the former business partner Tony Bobulinski?
Yep.
Okay, where they say that the email from the laptop that said 10% for the big guy. The big guy is Joe Biden. We have that piece of evidence, as well as these WhatsApp messages. It's going to crumble for the Bidens. There's no way.
It's a perfect case for impeachment. And you're right. All of those things, yes, they were all lies, but they were such dangerous lies that it has made America less safe on the world stage because it was a lie. It dragged Russia into our politics.
It dragged, not only that, but it was then the big tech companies being involved in this whole trying to cover up the Hunter laptop, not allowing for this conversation to happen.
They were directed
to do so.
We know this
impacted the election. Exactly. And this is what's so, I think, troubling for the American people.
Clearly, Mercedes and I are charged up about this. We have more to say about it. Don't go anywhere. There is more to be said about it. But
Mr. Vice President, as you said, your son Hunter today gave an interview, admitted that he made a mistake and showed poor judgment by serving on that board in Ukraine. Did you make a mistake by letting him? You were the point person on Ukraine at the time, if you can answer.
Look, my son's statement speaks for itself. I did my job. I never discussed a single thing with my son about anything having to do with Ukraine. No one has indicated I have. We've always kept everything separate. Even when my son was the Attorney General of the state of Delaware, we never discussed anything. So there'd be no potential conflict.
Right there is a bit of a smoking gun, Mercy, because he lied there. Of course, we know that he did talk to Hunter Biden about these things and knew very well about the business. But listen to what he said. We did that. We never talked. We did that so there would be no potential conflict. Well, clearly, the fact that he did do it says that there is a conflict.
Yeah.
And that conflict needs to be sorted out through an impeachment. Do you think he's going to get impeached?
Republicans get very nervous with impeachment. So you do have those, the firebrands, the Matt Gaetz and those guys really pushing hard for the impeachment. I thought it was a positive move in the right direction for McCarthy to say we may move forward with an impeachment inquiry, open up an impeachment inquiry. I just feel that Republicans get very nervous from the sense of how do we move forward with this without us making Joe Biden the victim, right? Like, if I would definitely impeach Mayorkas like yesterday. Mm-hmm. I would impeach Merrick Garland like yesterday, and then you got to move on Joe Biden. There's no things we need you. The reason why you do the impeachment inquiry is to continue to look at the evidence and look at the bank accounts and look at the trail. And I just think that what we're seeing right now with Joe Biden is very problematic for him.
I think they're meticulously finding those details and that evidence. They're putting the case together. And every time they make strides, another Trump indictment comes down. So they're making an impact.
Yes, absolutely.
Joe DeGenova joining us in just 15 minutes.